Democracy That Delivers is brought to you by the Center for International Private Enterprise. Now, to your host.
Hello, everyone. My name is Kathy Tai. I'm the Deputy Regional Director for Asia and the Pacific team at CIPE.
We have been going on this series now for a few months, known as the Emerging Leaders Series, featuring all of our up-and-coming change makers at CIPE, because we have so much talent here that really goes unthanked. And with all the work that we do here, we want to feature those who are behind it and the stories that are behind it. So that's why I'm really pleased to be here today with two of your colleagues from the Asia team. If you'd like to introduce them, Kathy.
Yes. So this is really my honor to co-host this podcast with you, Zoe, and also to introduce and have a discussion with two of my colleagues on the team. So it's Nora Willihan and Kendra Barak. So Nora and Kendra, do you want to just share a little bit about who you are and then a little bit background, where you're from, what's your interest, and then why you're here with us at CIPE? Maybe we start with you, Nora.
Yeah, definitely. So, hi everyone, I'm Nora Wheelahan. I'm the Asia Team Program Coordinator, and I'm currently living in Berlin, Germany. So, I've kind of grown up with parents who worked in the State Department and at the Army. So, I've lived more than half of my life abroad. And a fun fact is that I've never lived in one place for more than 2 years in a row. And so, basically, with that kind of lifestyle growing up, it just seemed pretty natural that I would end up in an international career. And so I got my bachelor's in international studies from Fordham in New York City. And then I just got my master's from George Washington in DC in international economics and international development. And I've been at CIPE since January of 2021, but playing a lot of different roles at CIPE. So yeah, Kendra, I'll toss it over to you.
Thanks. So I'm Kendra. I'm originally from Austin, Texas, and now I'm based here in DC. I got my undergrad in social work, and that really highlighted my interest in how systems shape the choices that people are able to make. But realized I was less interested in working on kind of that individual level and more interested in working on the systems level. I didn't know what that would look like. So as you do, I went to China to teach English. I meant to stay for 1 year, ended up staying for 3. And was around just as the Belt and Road was picking up. And that really highlighted my interest in what is happening with these huge infrastructure projects. Are they beneficial to people? And how are they going to shape how kind of China views itself? And so I came back to the US kind of to explore those questions more in depth with a master's in international relations, then hopped around a bit to a couple different think tanks, kind of looking at Chinese overseas investment, and then ended up here at CIPE with a project I'm really excited at that really is highlighting kind of recipient countries' agency and sort of how they interact with these investments. So I've been here since May of last year.
So it sounds to me, Kendra, like you had a very clear path, or you kind of fell into a very clear path focused on the Asian region, right? Whereas Nora, you were popping all over the place. So why Asia specifically? Why the Asia team? Why working with Kathy?
That's a great question, and I feel like I don't really have a proper answer to it. So I actually started at CIPE as an intern, like I said, last January, and I was actually an intern focusing on women's economic empowerment in the South Caucasus region, which once again, I didn't have any experience there either, and I just learned a lot about the region while conducting research project for the team and learning about it. And then something had popped up on the Asia team as like a PA, a program associate, and I was fortunate enough to work with Arya Najad on the South Asia work that we're doing. So Bangladesh, Nepal, Sri Lanka, and that kind of work. And then it's just kind of been learning a lot about the world. I mean, that's the only consistency that I have, is that I love learning about what else is going on in the world and just what's happening where, because I never really had a specific focus, but I definitely say I'm a fast learner. And so yeah, it just kind of has worked out, and I really love the work that we're doing in the Asia region. And then also from the PA position, then a program coordinator position popped up, and I was like, yeah, why don't I take a stab at this as well and see how it's going? And so yeah, so it's just kind of learning and seeing what opportunities arise and just taking advantage of everything that's there.
That's right.
We're so fortunate to have Nora, because it is pretty rare to have someone that already had a pre-exposure to CIPE from different teams. So Nora also brought in institutional knowledge that is a little bit rare among junior staff. So, and also she has great mentors, right? So great mentors like Lisa from the Caucasus team, Arya from our own South Asia team. So yeah, so Nora really has been a great start, and we're very fortunate to have her. And so maybe Nora, you want to just to share a little bit about your work experiences with maybe Lisa and Arya, and also some women leaders within SIPE.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I have been absolutely so fortunate to work with really great just mentors at SIPE. Like that's kind of how I've seen it. And so with my work with Lisa, it started off just as an internship, but what was phenomenal was that it wasn't just, when most people think of internships, they're like, oh, they just go get coffee. But at SIPE, they really make it something personal and it's really rewarding both for the intern and for the team. So like I said, I was able to do research that they're still able to use for future projects, and they were just drafting some proposals. They're like, oh yeah, we used, the data that you found to support like our upcoming project, which was really great. And so that was kind of the work that I did there, where it was supporting the women's economic empowerment work. And I got to work very closely with the SIWI team at SIPE. And so Connie Gonzalez and Barb Langley. So that's been really very fortunate there. And then working with Arya on the Asia team, she just continues to continue to encourage my knowledge, learning, and figuring out, okay, what's going on in the region? How does this connect to other teams and to other events that are happening in South Asia, but also greater in the Asian continent? And then from there, it's been really fantastic. I think using my institutional knowledge of knowing, okay, what's going on the E&E team, what's going on the LAC team as a program coordinator to try and coordinate between the different teams at SIPE as we're continuing to grow as an organization. And a lot of our projects are very much intersecting with other teams. And we've been working on just continuing that collaboration. So like with Kendra's work that she's been doing, a lot of the think tank network work that she's doing, and also with the BRI monitor, which she'll talk about, I'm sure. And so, yeah, so that's kind of just been really interesting as I'm learning. And, this program coordinator position is definitely new. And also, so is Kathy's position, the deputy regional director for the Asia team. And so it's been really great learning, Kathy, together with you. Okay, how can we work together to make sure that we're optimizing the flow of things, making sure that there's no blockages and everybody's thinking, oh, so-and-so has got this. Oh, but I thought they did. And so it's been really great just working with the Asia team, and then specifically with Kathy as we're figuring out these new roles and how we can just make the team and our work at SIPE better. And so I really think it's been awesome in that sort of sense.
Yeah, as a new woman in the SIPE workplace as well, really love to see my women colleagues recognized for their work and moving up the ladder as you have been. So congratulations. I did also want to ask, since you mentioned Kendra's work and speaking of mentorship and how important that is to, our context, specifically as women in the workplace. Kendra, you work a lot with like young entrepreneurs, think tank members. Do you want to tell us a little bit about any opportunities you've had either as a mentor or as a mentee in that scenario?
Sure. So one of the projects that we're just sort of kicking off is as part of the Asia Think Tank Network. So this is a network of I think 15, 16 different think tanks in Southeast Asia. They get together to kind of really discuss like issues that are of concern in the region and sort of see on things they can work together on, see ways they can support one another. And one of the things that the think tanks really began to highlight to us was sort of the concern about the lack of a talent pipeline, that a lot of young people don't necessarily see think tanks as sort of a viable path to involvement in kind of policy analysis or policy advocacy. And so one thing that we're doing this time around is sort of providing small grants to help kind of catalyze think tanks' involvement with young people. And I think that's kind of important, both for the reason that think tanks sort of outwardly identified, but also because the young people are such a powerful force for democracy and just in general in Southeast Asia. And so to not have them involved would be a real shame and would mean that you're missing a huge portion of the voice of the population. And so we're kind of actually going through right now and talking with these think tanks about how they can design good programs that are both supportive of their own work, but also supportive of these young people. And that's really exciting to be able to see kind of on the opposite side of things. Having worked at think tanks myself, and I think learned a lot, but also kind of wished that there was a bit more support. And so being able to kind of work with think tanks to make sure that that support is there for other young people, I think is a really exciting opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. And I imagine that the learning goes both ways as well, right? That, as you know, we're working with these partners. You're talking about coordinating, sharing the knowledge between them. Nora's talking about coordinating and sharing the knowledge between us at SIPE. And we're still learning and growing at the same time as we're trying to do the same for our partners. And I was really touched, Kendra, the other day when you mentioned that you found our partners to be so value oriented. And that's something that we can all strive towards, right? And how they set the example for us sometimes, right?
Definitely, yeah. Yeah, it's been a great pleasure to get to work with them, and I think learn a lot about what they're facing and kind of viewpoints that they have, and kind of learning from one another. Like I remember there was this really great discussion that we had as part of the think tank network, where one of the partners said, like, hey, you know, maybe in these difficult times we kind of need a stronger leadership. And one of the other think tanks saying, like, no, we've actually seen kind of where an authoritarian trend goes and you don't want it. So really being able to see those really deep discussions and those kind of cross-country learnings, I think was really cool.
And I think building off of what Kendra said, the way that our partners really lead our work, that's what really brings me to SIPE, and that's what's kept me at SIPE for so long, is how much of, I mean, it's a great organization. We do a lot of really great things all around the world. But what matters so much to me is that it's truly partner focused. You know, we go to the partners, we say, you guys are the experts. You guys tell us how we can support you to make these changes. And I mean, growing up, I've been very wary of international development because I've lived in Kenya and Nigeria. I've seen it go so wrong. But that's what I think about SIPE is so special and so different, is that we actually work with and listen to our partners, and we have them tell us what they want to see that's going on. And then we learn so much from them. And I think that's truly what makes SIPE stand out for me. And so, yeah, I definitely agree with Kendra's comments completely.
Yeah, and I imagine that comes with its fair share of challenges at the same time, right? We were just talking before the podcast about how you guys were on a late night call last night, managing time zones between all these Asian countries while being based in DC, Berlin. That can be difficult, not to mention the language as well, right? So, how do you manage some of those challenges? Open question to the floor.
I think we're fortunate that some members on the team speak languages, like local languages, and that really comes handy in terms of understanding like the culture, understanding like what's going on, and then partners feels a little bit more kind of closer to home when they talk to us. And then I think that also help build like trust and relationship, and trust is so important. So I think going back to the earlier point on we are a local driven, like partner driven organization, I think that partner knows that, right? So they know that we're in this in a long haul with them. So I think that kind of trust building, relationship building exercise is not just like a day overnight. It's really like where we have been there for decades. SIPE has been around for 40 years. So language definitely is a big help. And we also have a lot of local representatives. I think that's also sets SIPE apart, that to my knowledge, we don't have any chief of party or local representative that is an expat. So it's always, we rely on local staff, and then the staff will help guide us shape our strategy and then be part of the really brainstorming from the very beginning. So yes, I think these are all very just great assets we have, which is the connections, the trust, and the relationships that we have with local groups.
Kendra, do you want to follow that up? Because I happen to know that you are one of those language experts. And that's particularly impressive to me because I took a year and a half of Mandarin in college, and I'm sad to say I've forgotten most of it. So how do you do it? How do you maintain the language now that you've repatriated back to the States?
Sure. I don't know that I am also, I'm the model for maintaining language either. I can definitely see day by day not being surrounded by it. Definitely it's going downhill. But one thing that I do is I take a class on Chinese history in Chinese, and it's a lot of fun. It's sort of just like history as soap opera, basically. So, learning about China's only female emperor and how she, murdered everyone to get to the throne. So, I think just kind of having fun with the language really helps me want to keep studying it and keep using it. And I think, just also being able to see like, oh, this is how it's useful. This is how it can help advance my work really helps with the motivation for kind of wanting to retain it. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's an important tip to any of our young language learners out there, right? That it's always a work in progress, right? That as quickly as it can come, it can also go.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I took French like a year or 2 years in college. I speak
Quoi,
non.
Cathy? Allez, on essaye un peu.
Speak non. Oh yeah, see, like really
Yeah,
non.
see?
So I'm a native speaker of Mandarin, and I also speak Taiwanese Mingnan. So that's a dialogue completely different from Mandarin, and then it's speak in the southeast part of China and also Taiwan. So we call it Taiwanese. But then now that I don't speak that language that often, so when I go back to Taiwan, I try to speak Mingnan, Taiwanese. English comes up. And then so one day, conversation with the relatives, I tried to speak Minnan, and then English just like came right straight out the door, and I was like, "What's going on?"
Yeah, it's so true.
So language is like that. It's hard. It really is hard.
Yeah, even when you're raised in a language. Yeah.
Yeah, it really is hard. Nora also speaks many languages. I wonder how you keep it up.
Well, I was gonna say, so I actually used to live in Germany when I was very little, of course, and I used to speak fluent German. Like I was like the Wunderkind, like everything. And then we moved to Italy, and of course, like in Europe, like I could still keep the German and learned Italian. My family's also Italian. And then as soon as I moved back to the US just for a year, I forgot all of it. So I mean, my Italian though, like I went to Rome like what about a month ago or something, and the Italian came back like that, like it was nothing. But the German, I'm just still hoping that one day I just wake up and it's gonna come back to me. Hasn't happened yet, but it'll come. But yeah, it's funny too because I also speak like very good Spanish, and then a little bit of French, but I'm not even gonna try and play that game right now. But it's like it's sometimes though when I'm speaking,
It's dangerous to claim to speak French and set in front of a French national.
exactly. I'm like, I can get around there, but it's so funny too the way that languages in my head, like you would think Spanish, Italian, those are similar, so it makes sense when I get those confused. But sometimes when I'm speaking German, just like Spanish will just drop out. I'm like, oh, great, this is super fun. So definitely, our brains are fascinating, and it's very confusing with languages. But I'm really glad that I think it's so cool, and then you get to learn about the culture, and then you get to really understand what's going on in these regions and how you can look at all the Twitter memes and things like that, and just see you can really connect with what's going on. So that really ties into our work and in this field. So yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I'm curious about that aspect specifically, right? About learning the culture. And I feel like I'm wondering if going in, like Kendra, when you first moved to China, Nora now starting to work on the Asian region, learning the languages for both of you, what were some of the misconceptions that you had to rectify for yourself?
Yeah, I tried not to come in with a lot of stereotypes. I was really disappointed that not everyone was like Viking still, because when I was in elementary, I think I had read something about a lot of people biked in China, and not true. It is very smoggy. You don't want to be encouraging yourself to inhale that much smog, so totally understandable. Also, it's very hot in Wuhan. I think on the opposite side too, there was also kind of a lot of misconception dispelling. So a lot of my students were really disappointed that I did not party every day, and I had to tell them okay, Americans are a spectrum. Sorry, I'm one of the boring ones. But yeah, I think just
I wouldn't say boring now, Kendra. Yeah. You're selling yourself short. No, that's really interesting, right? Because you guys do focus so much on inclusive economic development, and that also means understanding that range of cultures anywhere that you're working. And I think that's really quite difficult. And we talked a little bit about some of the let's call them logistic challenges to your job. But when we get into kind of the more emotional challenges, I mean, it's hard to avoid discussing the recent elections in the Philippines and in Cambodia as well, but specifically the Philippines because everybody's watching that, right? So I'm curious what your take is on it as professionals working in that environment. Why do you think that this has captured the entire world's attention?
I mean, I think one thing is kind of Duterte has been seen as the Trump of the Philippines, like, and I think that's from the beginning. So then, of course, naturally, it's very difficult for US audiences all the time to focus on what else is going on in the rest of the world because there just has been a lot going on in the US. And so I think that that kind of connection has then brought it in that sense for at least American attention. And then also in terms of, I mean, even in Europe, just understanding how much, a lot of Europeans understand how similar and how closely related things are here, but then understanding with everything else that's been happening in the world and globalization, what is going on in the Philippines and what is going on in Sri Lanka, for example. Like, that's just one example that I can think of because they have in Berlin, there's protests all the time. And it was so cool because I actually had a protest for the Sri Lanka with the financial crisis that's going on, and they had one in like right outside of Brandenburg Gate. And then there have also been other different protests around understanding, what's going on in the Philippines. And just this understanding has been growing through, I think, the internet and through social media of, okay, like whatever else happens in the world really does impact us, whether or not it's very clearly we can see the impacts in our food prices or in our gas prices. And so I think that that's been part of it. And it's a very long-winded question. Answer. And so, but yeah, Kendra, if you wanted to add on to that.
Sure, yeah. I think sort of hopping off the Trump connection, I think like the Philippines was actually one of the first countries where we saw kind of disinformation and Facebook really play a major role in elections. And so hopefully we're learning from it this time around and seeing kind of the Philippines as kind of a canary in a coal mine, I think, as far as what are tactics that can be used to erode democracy. I think also like sort of talking to our partners in the region, especially when we were in Seoul and were able to meet with our partner from Malaysia, and also when we were in Indonesia, able to talk with kind of organizations there. I think the Philippines really has a strong civil society and also a really vibrant private sector. And so I think for those countries kind of thinking about their own elections and looking at the Philippines and seeing that even that vibrant civil society, that vibrant private sector hasn't been enough to prevent democratic backsliding is really concerning, I think, for other countries in the region as they think about kind of their own futures.
Yeah, I will echo that. When we were, so Kendra, I, and another colleague, Srijana, we were just in Indonesia 2 weeks ago. And basically, the election result in the Philippines came up in every single meetings we've had. And people were so concerned because Philippines and Indonesia and then some other Asian countries that they democratized basically around similar era. And then so they feel like they have come a long way. And then it was shocking to them that how easily democracy can really just backslide. So the good thing is the general election in Indonesia is not like until 2024. So, but I think there are a lot of like lesson learned, a lot of observations from the Philippines that would be really helpful to the wider region in general.
Yeah, and you mentioned like disinformation, right? Especially in the digital world. And I know that Kendra, you work on digital infrastructure, right? Do you think that there's any room for collaboration there, right, for improvement through your projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think so, because I think increasingly everything is becoming integrated, right? And so like even digital platforms also come with their own kind of software systems, kind of make it easier for certain businesses, things like that, to follow along. I think also just sort of looking at the market and overall kind of calls for transparency. And so if it is kind of a general atmosphere of transparency, it's easier to see kind of where is the funding going, who is doing what, where is this disinformation coming from, rather than kind of these opaque actors that are acting on behalf of someone, but you're not quite sure because the flows of financing or flows of investment are kind of unclear. Yeah, so I think kind of those two things, do go together.
Yeah, definitely. And I see how like you work more on the programmatic side of like digital economies, right? And digital infrastructures. And Nora then is working on the ground kind of the digital world because she handles the social media for your team. So I'm curious, especially I mean coming from both of your perspectives on this, for anybody out there who's just since maybe the Philippines election started to get an interest in Asian regional politics and that kind of thing, what would you suggest as the best news sources to stay up to date, right? Without while avoiding the disinformation.
I feel like it's very difficult because I'm gonna say one thing, but you have to I would say Twitter, and I say that, of course, with a
Wow.
massive, big, like, asterisk because I think that it's so like, it's a great news source to get information from people on the ground, but at the same time, you also need to be aware that anybody can tweet. Like, anybody can write a tweet, it does not matter, but I think that it's such a crucial access point for people to get information from, like the daily everybody can just log in. Not everybody reads, they wake up and they read the New York Times or the Bangkok Post or anything like that, but everybody has a Twitter or they have an Instagram or something. And I think that's been one of the most rewarding things that I've been part of as the program coordinator. I've actually worked with Kendra like on our BRI monitor work and making infographics that are super easy like to absorb, and like the data visualization aspect is really important because not everybody has time to go through and flip through the news channels and watch them for like however long you need to watch news for. It can change a lot, and so I think that's why I put a massive asterisk though, because anybody can tweet and say whatever they want, and so then it's difficult to know. But I think that that's something that I'm really proud of with our programming, is the fact that I've been able to work with Kendra on developing these like social media toolkits for our partners to tweet out. That way, people who are logged into it, in a sense, they can go, okay, I know this organization, they're really great, they're trustworthy. Hey, they have this simple, easily digestible tweet and a cute little infographic that can just help to make difficult topics easier to understand and easier to share. So, like I said, massive asterisks because it depends, but that's kind of part of it.
Yeah, I mean, not that I can think of, except to sort of echo that I think Twitter is a really great space, both because it allows you to ingest information quickly, but also because it allows sort of the democratization of discussion. And so sort of marginalized voices that otherwise would not have been highlighted in mainstream media are now able to say like, hey, this article is not reflecting my experience for this and this and this reason. And so I think kind of allowing you to kind of quickly view kind of the whole spectrum of views in one space is something that's really great there. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So I know we're a little bit short on time. And so I guess before we end today's podcast, we really would like to know kind of where your kind of your own career goals or your own kind of career professional plans are for the coming year, 3 years, 5 years. Where do you want to see yourself in, say, 3 years?
That is a massive question. I have absolutely no idea. And I can say that confidently because, like I've said, so much of my career so far has been just taking opportunities as they arise and not really being able to plan for it. But I mean, I'm really driven by a passion to make a difference in the world and to empower others. So I definitely envision myself continuing this kind of work and to work with incredible people and organizations that really inspire me and whose missions I relate with. And so I'm not really too sure. I mean, not really too sure, but it's all good because this way then I'm able to, so I have a general goal of just wanting to help people, and that just allows me to be open to any opportunities that arise.
I think that's great. You have a strong moral compass that will guide you to do whatever you're meant to do. Kendra?
Yeah, I would echo Nora. We were actually talking about this question before we started, and we're like, oh, we don't know what we're going to answer.
You knew it was coming.
3 years ago, I would not have anticipated that everyone would be working from home for 2 years. And so I think it's just shown how you need to be flexible and adapt. But I think kind of through lines that I see is sort of this mission or this drive to kind of address structural factors that kind of prevent, especially marginalized populations, but kind of populations in general, from being able to fully participate in economies and in societies, and kind of seeing how we can address those structural factors, and I think especially how we can empower those people to address those structural factors themselves. So it's not an outside force working on that in ways that may not be exactly what they want or what they need. And so I think that is definitely something that I will be involved in and want to continue to be involved in whatever form. Yeah.
Yeah. As you continue on this journey, do you have any parting thoughts for other emerging leaders following in your footsteps out there? So far in my notes, these are the recommendations that I have. Practice your Mandarin and read your Twitter daily. So, and I've got to say that's pretty surprising, because even on an emerging leaders series podcast that features junior staff, we have never heard that one before. So you guys clearly have some special little gems. If there's anything else you want to add before we close today?
I feel like Canva's your best friend. I don't know. That's been something that I have learned. Like, I have had no experience in this stuff before. And then all of a sudden it's like, all right, I'm just going to learn all of this. And I feel like now I do a pretty good job of it. And I just love Canva so much. So that's my
I promise this isn't a promoted podcast. Like, we don't receive funding.
Yeah.
I think another thing that I would say, I think, and that we've also seen in this podcast, is maybe like two things. One, kind of to have humility and really to kind of always be learning, always be curious. And I think the other thing is to have fun, because if you're not enjoying what you're doing, you will burn out. And so kind of to look for that, enjoyment, to look at kind of what you're accomplishing and really to celebrate it, I think is important.
Great. Thank you so much, Nora and Kendra. And thanks, Zoe, for co-hosting this episode. We have a great time talking about both of you. And again, I'm really honored. And then I really think it's my privilege to talk to you, and also to be able to work with all the fantastic partners we have in the Asia region. Yeah, before we end the episode, I do want to encourage the listeners to check out the Asia Pacific webpage and some of the projects that were mentioned, like BRI Monitor, and our fantastic other projects like the MTM Coral Sea and the South Asia Regional Work and Southeast Asia Think Tank Network projects. So I think that's it.
Yeah, we will make sure to link those resources in the podcast description for our listeners to check out some of the hard work that Nora and Kendra have been putting in here at SIPE. Thank you all for joining us for this finale of the Emerging Leaders series this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Democracy That Delivers has been brought to you by the Center for International Private Enterprise. For more information, please visit sipe.org.